This morning, we're lucky enough to have Sam Perkins, the CEO of Cellular Agriculture Australia, join us. CellAg is the only organisation dedicated to ensuring that Australia's cellular agriculture sector continues to provide and contribute more ethical, accessible and sustainable food for everyone. Sam in the past has led several not-for-profits. In his spare time, he took a PhD in aeronautical engineering from the University of Tasmania and also studied at the Cambridge University. He has a postdoctorate in with Hydro Tasmania and has lectured in fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, communication and design at the University of Tasmania. Sam is also a passionate advocate for animal welfare and the rights of all disadvantaged communities around the world. Sam, good morning. So let's start with a simple question, perhaps. What pathway led you from aeronautical engineering into cellular agriculture?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's been part of a pretty wiggly path. But it's the convergence of three threads. The first one started after I left my postdoc and worked in the humanitarian sector, which was, I guess, a developed passion for the appropriate use of technology to solve real-world problems. The second part of that was my introduction to being really conscious about the food system, and then coming to realize more recently, not only I think I have a role with relation to the way I engage with the food system as a consumer, but also understanding that the food system sort of sits at the nexus of a number of wicked problems, from climate change, food security, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, public health, animal welfare. It has a role to play not only in contributing to many of those, but potentially as a mitigation or as a solution as well. And so there you have the problem space, I guess. And then the third part is, I've been involved with a number of different organizations in varying roles. But I think I've developed this keen interest in getting in at the ground floor. And I think that's kind of where my capability set is best put to use. The opportunity to engage with Ag Australia as a not-for-profit organisation within this nascent, rapidly emerging sector who was looking at applying technology to try and be a part of the future of what our food system could look like. Brought those three threads together really beautifully.
But why do we need an organisation like Cellular Ag Australia, Sam?
At the crux of it is the sector as a whole faces a number of common non-competitive challenges, and a lot of the different entities within the sector have their own drivers, their own, I guess, for want of a better word, ambitions or metrics that they're looking at hitting. Whereas as a neutral entity, we don't have those. So we can really focus on what we think is going to be required to see the potential of the technologies realized. And that covers a number of topics that we focus on, such as making sure that our food regulatory system is not only ensuring that we have safe food to consume, but is conducive and supportive of these novel and innovative technologies, that we have policy environments and opportunities to receive government funding to support the evolution of these nascent technologies that have potentially a really significant role to play in the future of Australia's bioeconomy, let alone in the way Australia could be a leader within not only the food system, but within global ESG agendas. But at the crux of it, why do we exist is because we've heard very conclusively from the sector that an organisation like CAA, who can work across multiple stakeholders from the private sector to academia to investors to government to regulators, and is able to bring those diverse stakeholders together to not only understand what those common challenges are, but work across this diverse group to develop solutions or positions that are common and consistent in nature. And I think that's been seen as a really essential.
One of the things I was absolutely enamored with when I first read about Cellular Ag Australia and looked at your program historically was that you were doing a lot of work in schools and in education. But you went through a pretty significant refresh of your strategy in 2023. Could you tell us why you made that pivot into deepening your work in policy and advocacy in 2024?
One of our core values as an organisation is to be responsive, is not to be wedded to a particular area of work because that's what we say we do or that's what we've done in the past, but to try and position the limited resources we have to be as impactful as we possibly can be. The recent economic downturns are somewhat slowing the sector. We've we realised that the work in talent, although it's essential and it's going to be essential for the future of the sector, the timing wasn't quite right. And the momentum around that space was, if anything, dropping off. And at the same time, we were realising that there was an increased need for the sector to have a voice in being able to position it around key government policies that exist, but also to hopefully influence the development of new government policies and or strategies, and to ensure that emerging sectors like the cellular agriculture sector have a position within those strategies and policies. And the reason for that is really comes down to, one, there is a significant amount of opportunity for the government to build sovereign capability in this space, but also there's an essential role for governments to play in supporting the evolution of these nascent sectors, particularly when it comes to fundamental research or foundational scientific research, but also in making sure that we have infrastructure accessible to support companies as they translate from the proof of concept stage and R&D phase towards commercialization. And so not only did we hear this as a significant need from the sector's perspective, but we also started to get invited into more and more conversations with a range of different government agencies, both at the state and federal level.
My focus is in Western Australia, and I'd be interested if you've done any work or been invited to take part in any discussions in WA with our government so far.
Outside of engaging with yourself, Lisa, and I guess really appreciating the support you're providing to not only the cell ag space, but the broader alternative protein sector, we have conversations with academics and with a number of other entities, but no specific, I guess, government-based engagement. But it's something we would love to do, and we'd be very open to any conversations in the future.
There's very little public discussion that I hear, and also marginal consumer awareness and some skepticism, which is kind of the next question for me. You've just released an insight into the need for consumer research in Australia. You're focusing on cultivated meat, but also on precision fermentation. Would you tell us why you think this is such an important focus?
I actually think you mentioned something just before that, before you dive into the consumer acceptance space, which is, I guess, more social acceptance. We recognise that for the sector to succeed, it needs to be accepted by more than just consumers. It needs to be accepted and appreciated, the technology of the future, from a range of different stakeholders, many of which I've already mentioned. But on the consumer acceptance piece, a lot of my background is in the application of methodologies like human-centered design and co-design, where you place a future consumer or user of a particular piece of technology at the very center of the design process. There's an organization called IDEO who were effectively coined the concept of human-centered design. And they talk about a Venn diagram with three circles that intersect in the middle. And there are three elements that are required to develop a sustainable and scalable solution. One of them is the solution needs to be feasible. It needs to solve the problem. And the technologies within the cell ag space have proven that works. The technology works. It produces innovative, delicious, nutritious products. It needs to be viable. So it needs to have a viable financial model behind it. And this is something that a sector is working really hard on. Driving down costs of goods, and one of the critical enablers of that space is going to be having access to infrastructure, such as through the likes of Cauldron. But this is really where the government needs to step in and play a more significant role, as we've seen in other jurisdictions, so that we can prove the technology's scale and we can drive down costs of goods so that they're truly competitive. So then you've got technologies that work and they're ideally affordable. But the other circle is the desirability. And for the sector to succeed, it needs to be producing products that are desirable from an end consumer standpoint. And that's where consumer research comes in for me. It's developing the deep understanding of what are going to be critical drivers behind decision-making around purchasing from a consumer standpoint. And we're at a really tricky stage because we don't have, in the cell ag space, product in market yet. And yet, working with the right type of professionals, largely in the research space, there is a lot you can do to understand the perspectives of end consumers to then inform what products should be developed. The challenge sometimes is that consumer acceptance research is overlooked, or it's overlooked until the timing's a little bit too late, where we actually have products that are in the market. We're still trying to step in and play a critical role in funding and supporting social acceptance research with leading academics in Australia, so that we can start to build an evidence base on the back of which we hope the sector can inform its product development process, but in addition to that, the way in which we want to, or we believe we will need to communicate about the sector in the future.
I really welcome the research that you're doing into how we actually initiate conversation with consumers in a friendly and supportive way so that they see that this is a good thing for the future. I've got one final question. I'm really in the habit of granting superpowers to people. So I was wondering if I could give you one superpower, Sam, to help you achieve your vision. What would it be?
I really like the idea of being able to fly. Personally. So if you could grant me a superpower personally, I'm not convinced that's going to help us achieve our vision. It's a kind of moving towards the future where we have a sustainable, ethical, and accessible food system for everybody. But if I can kind of use that to pivot, it would be to be able to plant a money tree. But I truly do believe that one of the critical enablers of the future of this sector is going to be funding put in the right areas. And I think the right areas are around fundamental research, particularly around the research of what these technologies are going to require to scale well, and the infrastructure to do that. And the development of the future talent pipeline that we know we're going to need when we do scale, but also to support the companies really move towards the proving of the viability of their business models. But yeah, I'd love to fly, and I'd love the seeds to the money tree.
It's lovely to have time with you, and I wish you and your family all the best for the future. And I also really look forward to doing work with Cellular Ag Australia into the future. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's been a pleasure.